Good morning, River of Life Community Fellowship. It is time for our Wednesday edition of Sunday School, where we have a short daily devotion since we can't meet for Sunday School in person. So this week I talked about sin and temptation and how how we can deal with those as believers, how we deal with those things when they show up in our lives. But starting today, I want to talk a little bit about how we as believers are supposed to help other believers deal with these things in their lives. And today I'm going to be kind of hitting on one verse here and talking a little bit about what it means. And that verse is found in 1 Corinthians 8, and it is verse 9. And this is what Paul says: "But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak." And Paul said a similar thing in Romans 14, where he talked about using the freedom, not using the freedom that we have in our faith to cause people who are new to the faith to stumble in theirs. And so what does that mean? As for those of us who are followers of God, what does it mean to not put a stumbling block in the life of somebody else? Now the apostles and the first Christians in Jerusalem dealt with this issue, dealt with similar issues as well, because most of the first Christians were Jews, and so they believed in the Mosaic law and they followed it, and they were Jews. But then once God started really working kind of throughout the Roman Empire, people who were not Jews, people who were Gentiles, came to understand the truth of who Christ is and what he had done in their lives. And so then they were faced with this question. These church leaders, these apostles, are like, okay, so do these people who are not Jewish, do they have to become Jewish to follow Jesus? Do they have to be circumcised? Do they have to follow Mosaic law about what they can eat and what they can't eat and all of those things? And so as they were kind of dealing with this issue, they realized, okay, the Holy Spirit, God showed us that he accepts the Gentiles by giving them the Holy Spirit. And so we know that God accepts them. So why, and this is kind of the words of Paul. Paul told us, like, why would we put a yoke on them that we ourselves have had trouble following, dealing with? Why would we make them do something that we struggle with? And so they kind of came to this conclusion: no, if you're not Jewish, you don't have to act Jewish to be a Christian. And so they sent a letter out. Look, go ahead and you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to worry about following our strict dietary religions. Only, that's what they said, only don't eat food sacrificed to idols. And that was kind of all they said with it. And then a little bit later, the issue kind of comes up again, where Paul comes to Jerusalem and he's talking with the apostles, and they're like, look, people are saying that you're telling Jews to not follow Jewish law anymore, and that wasn't what Paul was saying. But then, so they said, so this is what we want you to do, Paul. Take the people that are with you who are Jewish and go through this Jewish purification ritual, so that the other Jews around here know that you are not preaching against the laws of Moses. And then as for the Gentiles, we've already told them, don't eat food sacrificed to idols. Now, what was the reason for these things? Did the Jews have to continue following Mosaic law in order to follow Christ? No, they didn't. Did the Gentiles, just like the Gentiles didn't have to follow Mosaic law, the Jews didn't either. But it was a part of their heritage, it was part of their culture, it was part of who they were, and so they felt it was an important part of their walking out faith with Christ. And so, in order to preserve the peace, the Jews that were with Paul were asked to preserve the peace with these other Jews around them, so that they could see, this is about Jesus and not about us. And then also with the Gentiles, they were asked to not eat food sacrificed to idols, so that they could preserve the peace with their Jewish believers. And so that was kind of what was going on there. And then we come into this letter with Corinthians, and what Paul was talking about when he said, don't put a stumbling block in front of other believers, was that that there were people that believed, hey, it's okay to eat food sacrificed to idols because idols aren't real. They don't represent anything real. So it's not like we're eating food sacrificed to some other god, because there is no other god. But then for someone who is new to the faith, who came out of a background of idol worship, they might still struggle with that idea. They might think, okay, here's these gods that we used to serve, but now there's this God above them. We serve that God instead. And then when they see other believers eating food sacrificed to other idols, they're like, well, eating food sacrificed to an idol is a form of worship. And so they're worshiping this other idol. And so if they are, well advanced in their faith and they're doing that, then it's okay for me to worship this other idol while I'm also worshiping the God above all gods. And so that would put a stumbling block in front of their faith. And so that's what Paul was saying. Hey, don't do things that hinder the growth of other Christians. So now how does that equate out to us today? Because there isn't a whole lot of idol worship like there was back then. We do it differently. Our idols are different than idols of wood and stone and other gods. But how does this kind of equate out into our modern society? How do we not put stumbling blocks in front of other believers? And I remember hearing a story. My wife and I were going through a course called Perspectives on the global missions movement, and that was just kind of about how God has been working throughout all history to spread his gospel throughout the globe. And as we were going through this, they kind of talked about this issue, and one of the things that came up was, at one point there was this woman who was raised Hindu, and she heard about Jesus, and she's like, yeah, like this is true, this is what I've been looking for my whole life, and I want to accept this, but I don't want to have to start eating meat. And she was a vegetarian as part of her faith, and so she kind of was very hesitant to join the faith because she was afraid that she was going to have to start eating meat. And so, like, if that was kind of a stumbling block for her faith. If the Christians would have, that she was around then, like, they didn't say this, she was just misunderstanding. But if they would have said, look, you don't follow that anymore, you can go ahead and have this hamburger, it's okay, it's not going to hurt, then that would have been a stumbling block for her, because for her, she considered that to be wrong. And that would have pushed her away from the faith. And another example is if someone, like a Muslim woman, comes to faith in Jesus. Like, if Christians were to say to her, okay, no more hijab, you don't have to cover your face, you don't have to cover your hair anymore because you are now a follower of Christ. For her, that's not just a faith thing, that's a cultural thing. And so that would be telling her, look, you need to leave your culture to join our faith. You need to be someone other than who you are now. And like that would put a stumbling block. That would cause them to not want to follow Jesus. And so my encouragement to you is, as we are going through, as followers of Christ are going through life, and we're interacting with people who are young in the faith or new in the faith or have some strong convictions in their faith, we need to make sure that the way we're living out our faith doesn't put a stumbling block in front of them, and also that it doesn't cause quarreling, that it doesn't cause us to fight with them, because we should try to live at peace with all people. As Paul said, we should be the ones to lay down our desires for the sake of others. That is one of the highest callings of following Christ, is to sacrifice for others. And so we lay down the things that are in our lives that might cause someone else to stumble, so that their faith can grow, so that they can be full of the Holy Spirit and not have us getting in the way of them and God. So that's my encouragement to you today. And I know it was kind of a little bit of a harder thing to understand, but I felt it was important. And so I really ask you to kind of, read the verse in Corinthians, and spend some time praying about it, and ask God if there's anything in your life that, as you're interacting with other people, that you need to step back from, so that these other people have a better chance to grow their faith. So that's my encouragement to you. Help others grow closer to God as you yourselves grow closer to God. Thanks, and God bless.